Commander Zixthara stood on the bridge of her warship, the Bone Harvester, watching the primitive planet rotate slowly beneath them. The third planet in this unremarkable system had somehow managed to destroy 3 of her scout ships in the past month. Not through superior technology or military might, but through something far more disturbing. They had talked to her warriors. The bone crown upon her elongated skull caught the light from the system's star, casting shadows across her reptilian features. Each skull embedded in the crown represented a species her ancestors had conquered and eliminated. The Kethmari, who had tried to negotiate. The Veltun, who had offered tribute. The Hoskata, who had begged for mercy. All gone now, their final representatives' skulls polished and mounted as eternal warnings to the galaxy. The Osean Empire had ruled through fear for over 2,000 years. Their philosophy was simple. The strong devoured the weak, and the strongest wore the bones of their enemies as crowns. Every Osean warrior earned their first skull through personal combat, and commanders like Zixthara wore crowns of entire civilizations. "Status report," she hissed, her forked tongue tasting the recycled air of the bridge. Subcommander Krath approached, his own smaller crown containing the skulls of 3 lesser species. "The humans have requested another meeting, Commander. They wish to discuss peaceful coexistence again." Zixthara's claws scraped against the command console. These humans had done something unprecedented in Osean history. When her scouts had landed on their world to begin the standard intimidation protocol, the humans had not cowered. They had not attacked. Instead, they had invited the Osean warriors to sit down and talk. "What did warriors Gresh and Thon report before we lost contact?" she asked. Krath consulted his data tablet, confusion evident in his yellow eyes. "Their final transmission spoke of questions, Commander. The humans kept asking them questions."
"What kind of questions?" "About their families."
"Their homeworld. Their feelings about the Empire." Krath paused, clearly struggling with concepts foreign to Osean culture. Gresh mentioned that a human female asked him about his childhood. Another wanted to know if he had ever considered a different path in life. Zixthara felt something cold settle in her stomach. In all her years of conquest, no species had ever asked about feelings or childhood. They usually focused on military capabilities, surrender terms, or desperate attempts at negotiation. Questions about personal experiences were unusual. And then what happened to them? Unknown, Commander. They stopped responding to communications. Long-range scans show their ships intact and landed safely on the surface, but our warriors never returned. The humans sent a message afterwards saying our people were welcome to stay as long as they liked, and asking if we wanted to send someone to check on their well-being. This was unprecedented. Enemy forces didn't invite you to check on captured warriors. They displayed their remains as warnings or sent back pieces as intimidation tactics. The Osean way was clear. Conquest through fear, dominance through superiority, control through the display of power. "Prepare my personal shuttle," Zixthara decided. "I will go down myself and retrieve our missing warriors." "Commander," Krath ventured carefully, "perhaps we should simply glass the planet from orbit." Standard protocol for non-compliant species. Zixthara considered this. It would be the traditional response. The humans had somehow neutralized 6 of her finest warriors without apparent violence. They posed a clear threat to Imperial doctrine. Turning their world to molten rock would send the proper message to any other species considering resistance. But something held her back. In her 300 years of service to the Empire, she had never encountered anything like this situation. Her scientific curiosity, a trait the Empire generally discouraged but found useful in commanders, demanded answers. "No," she said finally. "I want to understand what happened down there. How does a primitive species capture ocean warriors without battle? What weapons did they use? What tactics?" An hour later, Zixthara descended through Earth's atmosphere in her personal shuttle, accompanied by only 2 guards. The bone crown felt heavier than usual as she reviewed what little intelligence they had gathered on the humans. They were young as a species, having only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their military technology was primitive by galactic standards. They had no unified planetary government, instead organizing themselves into hundreds of smaller nation-states that frequently disagreed with each other. By every logical measure, they should have surrendered immediately upon witnessing Osean power. The shuttle landed in a green field outside what humans called a city. Zixthara had chosen this location deliberately, away from major population centers, to limit potential complications. She stepped out onto alien soil, her 8-foot frame imposing even by Osean standards. Waiting for her were 3 humans and what appeared to be her missing warriors. Zixthara's shock was complete. Warriors Gresh, Thon, Vek, Hrun, Zeph, and Cross stood in a loose group with the humans looking relaxed. Not bound, not restrained, not displaying any signs of captivity or coercion. They appeared to be in the middle of some kind of conversation. "Commander!" Gresh noticed her arrival and approached. "You came yourself. These humans are remarkable. Did you know that Warrior Thon has been writing poetry in his spare time? He never told us, but the humans encouraged him to share it, and it's actually quite good." Zixthara stared at his subordinate as if he had grown a second head. Poetry was not an Ossian concept. Warriors were trained for combat, conquest, and control. They did not write poetry. "Gresh," she said slowly. "Explain your status. Are you prisoners?" "No, Commander, we're guests. The humans have been showing us their culture, their history. Did you know they have museums where they preserve the artifacts of civilizations that existed thousands of years ago? Not as trophies, but to remember and honor them." Before Zixthara could respond, one of the humans stepped forward. It was small, even for their species, with brown skin and dark hair. Most significantly, it showed no fear whatsoever at being in the presence of an Ossian commander wearing a crown of conquered skulls. "Welcome to Earth," the human said in perfectly pronounced Ossian. "My name is Dr. Ba, Sarah Chen. We've been hoping to meet you." Zixthara felt her world shift slightly. The human had spoken in her language which should have been impossible. Her species guarded their linguistic codes carefully. More disturbing was the human's tone. Warm, welcoming, genuinely pleased to meet her. "How do you know our language?" Zixthara demanded. "Your warriors taught us." "Dr. Chen replied. "We've been learning about each other. They're fascinating people with such rich personal histories. Warrior Gresh was telling us about the poetry traditions of his homeworld before the Empire standardized cultural expression." Zigthar's claws extended involuntarily. Poetry traditions? Her homeworld had been a military society for centuries. There were no poetry traditions. "That is incorrect," she said carefully. "Our homeworld values strength, not artistic expression." Dr. Chen tilted her head, and Zixthara recognized the expression from her intelligence briefings. Humans made this gesture when they were curious or confused about something. It was disturbingly similar to how young Ossian children looked when they didn't understand something, before they were properly trained. "But Gresh mentioned that his grandmother used to sing battle songs that told stories of great warriors," Dr. Chen said. "Isn't that a form of poetry? A way of preserving history and emotion through artistic language?" Zixthara felt something fundamental crack inside her understanding of the universe. Battle songs were indeed part of Ossian tradition, though the Empire had discouraged them in recent generations as a distraction from pure military focus. But she had never thought of them as poetry. They were simply battle songs. "That is not the same thing," she said. But even as she spoke, she realized she couldn't articulate why. Dr. Chen's smile was gentle. "Would you like to sit down? I imagine space travel is tiring, and we have so much to discuss. Your warriors have been teaching us about Ossian culture, and we'd love to learn more. Especially about that beautiful crown you're wearing. The craftsmanship is incredible. Each skull is so detailed and unique." And there it was. The question that would change everything, delivered not as an accusation or a challenge, but as genuine curiosity about artistry and craftsmanship. "What do the skulls represent?" Dr. Chen continued. "They must have tremendous cultural significance to merit such careful preservation and display." Zixthara found herself looking down at this small human, who was asking about her bone crown, as if it were a museum piece rather than a symbol of terror and dominance. For the first time in her 3 centuries of life, she realized she had never actually thought about why she wore the skulls of conquered species. She wore them because she was supposed to. Because every Ossian commander did. Because it was tradition, law, and the natural order of things. The strong wore the bones of the weak. That was simply how the universe worked. But as Dr. Chen waited patiently for an answer, her expression open and interested, Zixthara found herself facing a question she had never considered. Why had her people chosen this tradition in the first place? What had her ancestors been thinking when they decided that wearing the remains of the dead was the best way to demonstrate strength? "They represent," she began, then stopped. She looked at her warriors, who were watching the exchange with interest rather than the disciplined attention she expected. She looked at the humans, who seemed genuinely curious rather than terrified. She looked at Dr. Chen, who was waiting for her answer with the patience of someone who truly wanted to understand. For the first time in her life, Commander Zixthara of the Osean Empire realized she didn't have a good answer to a simple question about why she did what she did. And that realization was more terrifying than any weapon she had ever faced. Dr. Chen led them to what humans called a park. Zixara found herself walking beside the small human while her warriors spread out among the other humans, continuing conversations that seemed to have been going on for days. The bone crown felt strange on her head, heavier somehow, as if Dr. Chen's question had added weight to it. "This is where we often come to think, Dr. Reed," Chen explained, gesturing to the green space filled with trees and flowering plants. "We find that natural settings help facilitate deeper conversations. Would you prefer to sit on the grass, or we can arrange chairs?" Zixthara stared at the offered choices. In all her years of conquest, no defeated species had ever asked about her seating preferences. They usually cowered, begged, or attempted futile attacks. They did not offer comfort accommodations. "The grass is acceptable," she said, settling her large frame onto the ground with surprising grace. Dr. Chen sat cross-legged nearby, close enough for comfortable conversation but far enough away to avoid seeming threatening. "Your warriors have been telling us fascinating things about Ashan society," Dr. Chen began. "Warrior Gresh mentioned that your people have incredible lifespans by our standards. That must give you such a unique perspective on history and change." Again, a question that wasn't quite a question. Dr. Chen had a way of making observations that invited response without demanding it. Zixthara found herself answering almost automatically. "Yes, we live longer than most species. It allows us to accumulate experience and wisdom across multiple generations of shorter-lived races." "That's remarkable," Dr. Chen said with genuine enthusiasm. "What kinds of changes have you witnessed in your lifetime? It must be incredible to watch civilizations develop and evolve." Zixthara paused. In her 3 centuries, she had indeed watched changes, but they had all involved conquest, submission, and incorporation into the empire. She had seen independent species become client states, watched free worlds transform into resource extraction sites, observed unique cultures gradually homogenize under imperial control. "I have seen the galaxy become more orderly," she said finally. "Orderly how?" The simple follow-up question hit like a precision strike. How was the galaxy more orderly? The Osean Empire controlled vast territories through fear and military might, but Zixthara suddenly realized that their method of creating order involved destroying the very diversity that might have made the galaxy interesting. "Fewer conflicts between species," she said. Though even as she spoke, she knew this was because most species were too terrified to fight back, not because they had resolved their differences peacefully.
"That's interesting," Dr.
Chen mused. "We humans have found that some of our greatest advances have come from conflicts of ideas rather than the absence of conflict altogether. Not violent conflicts, but disagreements that force us to examine our assumptions and find better solutions. Do you think there might be a difference between peace through understanding and peace through fear?" Zixthara felt her worldview tilting again. The Empire had created peace through fear, certainly. Entire sectors of the galaxy remained quiet because they knew the consequence of resistance. But was that the same thing as actual peace? Did species truly coexist harmoniously, or did they simply survive by avoiding attention? "Our method has been effective," she said carefully. "Oh, absolutely, Doctor," Chen agreed. "I imagine it's been very effective at preventing open conflict. We humans have tried similar approaches in our own history. We've had empires that controlled vast territories through military superiority and intimidation." This surprised Zixthara. "You have had empires? But your species appears so weak?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Small? Disorganized? Yes, we probably seem that way to you. But we've had our share of conquerors and empire builders. Some of them were quite successful for a time. What happened to them?" "They fell," Dr. Chen said simply. "All of them, eventually. We learned some interesting things from those experiences." Zixthara leaned forward despite herself. The idea that empires could fall was not something the Osean Military Academy had spent much time discussing. The empire was eternal, built on principles that ensured its perpetual dominance. What did you learn? That power, based on fear, is inherently unstable. Dr. Chen explained. It requires constant enforcement and escalation. People comply because they're afraid, not because they believe in the system. The moment the fear lessens, or someone finds a way to resist that fear, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. But if you eliminate those who resist, Then you eliminate the very diversity and creativity that might have strengthened your civilization, Dr. Chen finished. We had emperors who thought like that. They created magnificent short-term stability by destroying anything different or challenging. But in the long run, they stagnated. Innovation stopped. Growth halted. They became powerful but brittle. Zixthara thought about the Osean Empire's recent centuries. When was the last time they had developed new technology? When had they last discovered something genuinely novel? Most of their advancement came from conquering species and adopting their innovations. The Empire maintained its edge through accumulated superiority rather than ongoing development. Your warriors have been telling us about their individual stories, Dr. Chen continued. Would you mind if I asked about yours? What led you to become a commander? What was your path through life? The question was so personal that Zixthara's first instinct was to refuse. Osean military tradition discouraged personal history. Warriors were expected to identify completely with the Empire, to subordinate individual experience to collective purpose. Personal stories were weaknesses that enemies could exploit. But Dr. Chen's genuine curiosity was disarming. She sat in the grass, surrounded by the bones of conquered civilizations, asking about Zixthara's life as if she were talking to a friend rather than an invader. I was bred for command, Zixthara said slowly. Selected from childhood for superior genetics and trained in military academies. My path was determined before I could speak. Bred for command? That's fascinating. So your society practices genetic selection for specific roles? Yes. It ensures optimal performance in designated functions. Doctor. Chen nodded thoughtfully. We've experimented with similar concepts, though we approached it differently. We found that while genetic potential matters, environmental factors and personal choice often prove equally important. Some of our greatest leaders came from unexpected backgrounds. Have you ever wondered what you might have chosen to become if the choice had been yours? The question struck Zixthara like a physical blow. In 3 centuries of existence, she had never once considered what she might have chosen for herself. Choice was not an Osean concept for military personnel. You were what you were bred to be, trained to be, ordered to be. That question has no meaning, she said. I am what I am meant to be. But before you were trained, when you were very young, did you have interests? Things that caught your attention or made you curious? Despite herself, Zixthara found her mind drifting back to earliest memories. In the brief period before intensive military conditioning began, she remembered being fascinated by the star charts in the Academy Library, not for their strategic value, but because each point of light represented an entire world with its own unique characteristics. She had wondered what those worlds were like, what kinds of life they might harbor, what stories they might tell. That curiosity had been systematically trained out of her as inefficient and strategically irrelevant. Worlds were resources, strategic positions, or threats to be neutralized. Their intrinsic characteristics mattered only insofar as they affected military planning. I was curious about astronomy, she admitted, then immediately felt foolish for the confession. Dr. Chen's face lit up. Really? That's wonderful. Some of our finest scientists started with childhood fascination with the stars. Do you still find space interesting beyond its military applications? Zixthara realized that she did. Oh, despite centuries of viewing the galaxy through military eyes, she still felt a stirring of wonder when her ships approached new systems. She still noticed the beauty of stellar phenomena, even when they held no tactical significance. Sometimes, she said quietly. What kinds of things do you notice? Binary star systems with complex orbital mechanics, planetary rings with unusual compositions, nebulae that create atmospheric effects. Zixthara stopped, realizing she was describing aesthetic appreciation rather than strategic analysis. Dr. Chen smiled. You see beauty in space. That's a rare and precious gift. Have you ever considered that your appreciation for cosmic phenomena might be enhanced by understanding the cultures that developed under different stellar conditions? Each civilization we've encountered has developed unique perspectives on the universe based on their specific cosmic environment. The suggestion was revolutionary. Zixthara had spent 3 centuries viewing other cultures as obstacles to overcome or resources to exploit. She had never considered that they might offer unique insights into the universe itself. The Kethmari had a beautiful tradition of stellar cartography that incorporated artistic elements. Dr. Wood. Chen continued casually. They created star maps that were also poems, describing not just the positions of celestial bodies, but their emotional and spiritual significance to their culture. Zixthara felt something cold and terrible settle in her stomach. The Kethmeri are extinct. They were conquered 2 centuries ago. Yes, Doctor, Chen said gently. Warrior Gresh mentioned that. He seemed quite sad about it, actually. Apparently, he had been thinking about what their astronomical poetry might have taught your people about seeing the universe from new perspectives. The weight of this hit Zixthara like a collapsing star. The Kethmari skull in her crown represented not just a military victory, but the permanent loss of a unique way of understanding the cosmos. Their astronomical poetry, their artistic star maps, their entire perspective on the universe was gone forever. We did not know about their astronomical traditions, she said weakly. Of course not, Dr. Chen replied without judgment. How could you? Military conquest rarely involves cultural exchange, but imagine if instead of conquering them, your people had chosen to learn from them. Imagine what your astronomical knowledge might have become if it had been enriched by their poetic perspective. Zixthara looked at her crown of skulls with new eyes. Each one represented not just a conquered enemy, but lost knowledge, unique perspectives that would never again contribute to galactic understanding. Entire ways of thinking, feeling, and seeing the universe had been extinguished to create the Empire's homogeneous order. The Velton had fascinating mathematical concepts related to quantum mechanics. Dr. Crow, Chen continued, and the Hiskatar developed a form of music based on gravitational wave patterns. All of these innovations died with their civilizations. Why are you telling me this? Zixthara asked, though she was afraid she already knew. Doctor, Chen's expression remained gentle but serious. Because we think there might be another way. Your people have incredible individual talents and interests, just like Gresh's poetry or your astronomical curiosity. But your system channels all of that potential into a single narrow function: conquest. Conquest ensures survival, Zixthara said, but her voice lacked conviction. Does it? Chen asked. Or does it ensure that your people never have the opportunity to discover what they might become if they were free to explore their full potential? Your warriors have been with us for days, and we've watched them flourish in ways that their military training never allowed. They're curious, creative, thoughtful individuals who have been shaped into a single mold. Zixthara watched her warriors scattered around the park, engaged in animated conversations with humans. For the first time, she noticed that they looked relaxed, engaged, intellectually stimulated, in ways she had never seen before. What are you proposing? She asked. Doctor, Chen smiled. That's a conversation for tomorrow. For now, we were wondering if you'd like to stay for dinner. We're having a cultural exchange feast where your warriors are going to teach us some traditional Ossian recipes, and we're sharing some of our favorites. Warrior-thon is particularly excited to try something called ice cream. As if summoned by his name, Warrior-thon approached, carrying what appeared to be a flowering plant. Commander, he said, his voice bright with enthusiasm. The humans have gardens where they grow plants purely for aesthetic appreciation. No strategic value, no nutritional benefit, just beauty. Look at this flower. Have you ever seen anything like it? Zixthara stared at the delicate blue petals Thorn held out to her. In 3 centuries of military service, she had never stopped to examine a flower. She had seen countless worlds, walked on hundreds of alien surfaces, but always with strategic purpose. Never simply to appreciate beauty. The flower was extraordinary. Its petals seemed to capture and reflect light in ways that created an almost luminescent effect. The structure was both simple and complex, following mathematical patterns that spoke to her astronomical training, while displaying an aesthetic sophistication that touched something deeper. It's beautiful, she said, and realized she had never spoken that word in relation to anything other than stellar phenomena. As the sun began to set over the human city, Zixthara found herself sitting in an alien park, holding a flower, surrounded by her warriors who were laughing with their former enemies, wearing a crown of bones that suddenly felt like a tremendous burden. For the first time in 3 centuries, she began to wonder what else she might have missed while spending her life focused on conquest. Dinner with the humans was unlike anything in Zixthara's experience. She had attended countless military banquets, formal imperial ceremonies, and strategic meetings over shared meals. But this gathering had no agenda, no hierarchy, no purpose other than sharing food and conversation. The humans had arranged long tables in the park, lit by soft lights that created a warm atmosphere as darkness fell. Zixthara's warriors sat mixed among the humans, engaged in animated discussions about everything from cooking techniques to philosophical concepts. The sound of laughter echoed across the space, and she realized with a start that she had never heard her warriors laugh before. Commander, Warrior Vec called out from across the table. Did you know that humans have over 50 different words for types of precipitation, and they use them in poetry to convey emotional states? Before Zixthera could respond, a young human woman at Vec's side added, "We were discussing how language shapes thought." Vec was telling us that Osean military language has very precise terms for different types of tactical situations, but almost no words for emotional nuance. Doctor Chen, who had taken the seat beside Zixthara, leaned closer. That's fascinating, isn't it? How the words we have available influence the thoughts we can think. Your military language must be incredibly sophisticated in some areas. It is efficient, Zixthara replied. Precise communication saves lives in combat situations. Absolutely, Doctor. Chen agreed. Clear communication is vital in any high-stakes situation. We've developed similar precision in our emergency response and medical fields. But we've found that having multiple types of language helps us think about problems from different angles. Sometimes emotional language reveals solutions that purely logical language misses. A human male, across the table, introduced as Dr. Martinez, joined the conversation. We were discussing this with Warrior Brum earlier. Military problems often have human elements that can't be solved through tactical analysis alone. Understanding motivation, fear, hope, cultural values can be more important than understanding weapon capabilities. Zixthara considered this. The Empire's approach to other species was indeed purely tactical. They analyzed military strength, resource availability, strategic positioning. They never considered emotional factors, because emotions were viewed as weakness, inefficiency in decision-making. Emotions cloud judgment, she said, reciting imperial doctrine. Sometimes, Doctor, Chen acknowledged, fear can make people panic, anger can lead to poor decisions. But emotions also provide valuable information. Fear tells you about danger. Anger indicates violated values. Hope motivates people to attempt things that logic says are impossible. And love, added Dr. Martinez, makes people fight harder than any military training ever could. Warrior Gresh, who had been listening to the exchange, spoke up. The humans showed us recordings of their historical conflicts. Soldiers protecting their families fought with desperation that exceeded anything our tactical manuals describe. Not because of superior training or equipment, but because they were emotionally invested in the outcome. Zixthara felt another piece of her worldview shift. Ashu military doctrine emphasized detachment, clinical efficiency, logical analysis. Emotional investment was seen as a vulnerability that enemies could exploit. But these humans were suggesting that emotional investment could be a source of strength. Tell me about your families, Doctor, Chen said, and the simple request sent a ripple of surprise around the gathered Oceans. In the Empire, family ties were minimized. Children were raised in military academies, assigned to breeding programs based on genetic optimization, and discouraged from forming strong personal attachments. Family was a biological function, not an emotional bond. But as the evening progressed, Zixthara listened to her warriors share stories she had never heard. Gresh spoke about a sister who had died in training, and how he still performed a small ritual in her memory before each mission. Thun mentioned dreams about a mother he barely remembered, whose singing voice had been the only beautiful thing in his early life. Vec described a genetic father who had secretly taught him to appreciate stellar phenomena during brief, unsupervised moments. Each story revealed hidden depths in warriors she had commanded for decades. They were not the efficient military units she had thought, but complex individuals with private emotional lives that somehow made them more human and, paradoxically, more effective as soldiers. What about you, Commander? Dr. Chen asked gently. Do you have family memories? Zixthara's instinct was to deflect, to maintain professional distance. But surrounded by her warriors sharing personal stories, wearing a crown that suddenly felt like evidence of terrible mistakes, she found herself remembering. I had a clutch brother, she said slowly, in the breeding facility where I was raised. His genetics were deemed inferior for military service, so he was assigned to technical support roles. We were separated when I was sent for command training. Do you know what happened to him? He died in an industrial accident on a resource extraction world, 20 years ago. Zixthara paused, surprised by the pain that still accompanied this memory. I had not thought about him in some time. Dr. Chen's expression was deeply compassionate. What was his name? Zigzven. Speaking the name aloud felt strange. She had not said it in decades. What was he like? What do you remember about him? He was curious about everything. Always asking questions, wanting to understand how things worked. The trainers found it disruptive, inefficient. They said his mind wandered too much for military application. He sounds like he would have made an excellent scientist. Doctor. Chen observed. That kind of curiosity is exactly what drives discovery and innovation. The observation hit Zixthara like a physical blow. Zixvian would indeed have been an excellent scientist. His questions, his need to understand, his fascination with how things worked, all of it would have been valuable in scientific research. Instead, the Empire's rigid categorization system had relegated him to a dangerous industrial job where his intellectual gifts were wasted. The Empire does not value scientific curiosity highly, she said. Why not? Asked Dr. Martinez. Scientific advancement seems like it would benefit any civilization. Another simple question that revealed a fundamental flaw in imperial thinking. Why didn't the Empire value scientific curiosity? They used advanced technology, but most of it was adapted from conquered species rather than developed internally. The Empire focused on applying existing knowledge efficiently rather than developing new knowledge creatively. Scientific research is unpredictable, Zixthara explained, reciting imperial educational doctrine. It consumes resources without guaranteed returns. Military applications provide more reliable benefits. But where do the military applications come from originally? Doctor, Chen asked. Someone has to discover the basic principles before they can be applied militarily. Other species, Zixthara realized as she spoke. We adapt technologies developed by other species. And what happens when you've conquered all the species capable of innovation? Dr. Martinez pressed gently. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. What did happen when the Empire eliminated all sources of innovation? What happened when every curious, creative mind like Zixvian was either suppressed or destroyed? What happened when conquest stopped yielding technological advancement because there was nothing left to conquer? Stagnation, decline. Eventual collapse as resources were depleted and challenges arose that could not be solved with existing knowledge. Your brother sounds like he was a remarkable person, Dr. Ryder pried, Chen said softly. His curiosity might have led to discoveries that benefited everyone. Scientific knowledge doesn't belong to any one group. It enriches all of civilization. Across the table, Warrior Cross was examining a human device with fascination. This tablet computer contains more processing power than our military command systems, he announced. But it was designed for entertainment and communication, not warfare. How is that possible? Dr. Martinez smiled. Innovation driven by civilian applications often exceeds military development because it serves broader needs. When millions of people want better communication, entertainment, and productivity tools, the incentive for improvement is enormous. Military applications are important, but they're just one use for advancing technology. Your warriors have been asking excellent questions about our development processes, Dr. Chen added. They understand the technical aspects immediately, but they're curious about the social and economic systems that drive innovation. Zixthara realized her warriors were having exactly the kind of conversations that imperial training discouraged. They were thinking beyond military applications, considering broader implications, asking questions about systems rather than just tools. What kinds of questions? She asked. Warrior Thon, who had been quietly working through a bowl of ice cream with evident delight, looked up. I asked them how they organize research projects when there's no military hierarchy giving orders. How do civilian scientists decide what to study? How do they coordinate efforts without command structure? And what did you learn? That they use collaboration instead of command, Don said, his voice filled with wonder. Scientists share information, build on each other's work, argue about different approaches, and find solutions through collective effort rather than individual authority. Dr. Chen nodded. We've found that diverse perspectives lead to better solutions than any single approach. When people with different backgrounds and expertise work together freely, they often discover things that none of them could have found alone. Like astronomical poetry. Zixthara murmured, thinking about the lost Kethmeri traditions. Exactly like that. Dr. Chen confirmed. Each culture develops unique ways of understanding reality. When those perspectives combine, the results can be extraordinary. As the evening progressed, Zixthara found herself participating in conversations that would have been unthinkable aboard an imperial warship. They discussed art, philosophy, scientific theories, personal dreams, and social structures. Her warriors contributed insights based on their experiences, but they also absorbed new ideas with enthusiasm that their military training had never allowed them to express. When the gathering finally began to wind down, Dr. Chen approached her privately. Commander, we need to discuss something important. Your fleet is still in orbit, and we imagine they'll be expecting a report soon. The reality of her situation crashed back over Zixthara. She had spent an entire day with the enemy, allowing her warriors to be influenced by alien concepts, participating in activities that violated every principle of Imperial military doctrine. When she returned to her ship, she would be expected to report on human capabilities, recommend strategies for conquest, and proceed with standard Imperial protocol. What am I supposed to tell them? She asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. That depends, Dr. Chen said gently, on what you want the outcome to be. It was the most dangerous question anyone had ever asked her. For 3 centuries, what she wanted had been irrelevant. She followed orders, executed Imperial policy, and achieved assigned objectives. Personal preferences were weakness, inefficiency, potential sources of corruption. But as she looked around at her warriors engaged in animated discussions with humans, as she felt the weight of the bone crown on her head, as she remembered her brother's curiosity and considered all the lost knowledge it represented, Zixthara realized she did want something. She wanted to understand what her people might become if they had the opportunity to be more than just conquerors. She wanted to know what the galaxy might look like if it was shaped by collaboration rather than fear. She wanted to discover what innovations might emerge from the kind of diverse, curious, creative thinking she had witnessed today. Most dangerously of all, she wanted to find out if an empire built on conquest could transform itself into something worthy of the magnificent potential she had glimpsed in both her warriors and these remarkable humans. I want to prevent the destruction of your species, she said finally. Doctor, Chen smiled. Then we should probably talk about how to make that happen. Chen led Zixthara to a quiet building the humans called a library. The concept fascinated and horrified the Osean commander in equal measure. Thousands of books, databases, and records containing the accumulated knowledge of human civilization, freely accessible to anyone who wanted to learn. This is how we preserve knowledge, Doctor, Chen explained, gesturing to the vast collection. Not as trophies or symbols of conquest, but as living resources for future generations to build upon. Zixthara thought of the bone crown on her head, each skull representing not just a conquered enemy, but an entire library's worth of knowledge that had been destroyed rather than preserved. The weight of loss was staggering. Your warriors have been spending time here, Dr. Chen continued. They're voracious learners once they're free to explore their curiosity. Gresh has been reading about terraforming techniques. Thon discovered poetry from 17 different human cultures. Vec has been studying theoretical physics approaches that differ significantly from imperial methods. They settled into comfortable chairs in a quiet section, surrounded by books on astronomy and space exploration. Through the windows, Zixthara could see her shuttle in the distance, a reminder of the decision that awaited her. My fleet will be expecting a status report soon, she said. What are your options? Dr. Chen asked. Zixthara considered the possibilities. Standard Imperial protocol was clear. A species that successfully resisted Imperial forces, regardless of methods used, represented a threat to be eliminated. The fact that humans had somehow neutralized 6 Osean warriors without violence made them even more dangerous from the Empire's perspective. I could recommend immediate orbital bombardment, she said. Complete planetary sterilization followed by resource extraction. Doctor? Chen nodded calmly. That would certainly solve the Empire's immediate problem. What else? I could recommend a full invasion, deploy overwhelming force to crush human resistance and establish Imperial control. Also a possibility. What other choices do you have? Zixthara realized that Dr. Chen was walking her through the same kind of analytical process her warriors had described. Not giving her answers, but helping her think through the implications of different approaches. I could report that humans pose no immediate threat and recommend surveillance while the Empire addresses more pressing concerns elsewhere.
That would buy time, Dr.
Chen agreed. Anything else? I could. Zixthara paused. The thought so radical that speaking it felt like treason. I could recommend that the Empire attempt to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. How do you think your superiors would respond to that recommendation? They would question my loyalty? Possibly remove me from command. Diplomatic relations are not an Osean concept with species outside the Empire. Doctor. Chen was quiet for a moment, letting Zixthara work through the implications. Then she asked the question that cut to the heart of everything they had discussed. Commander, what do you think would be best for your people? Not for the Empire as an institution, but for the individual Oseans who serve it. The distinction was crucial. What was best for the Empire as a military organization might be very different from what was best for the people within it. Zixthara thought about her warriors, about their obvious joy in discovering new ideas and expressing suppressed aspects of their personalities. She thought about her brother, whose curiosity could have contributed to galactic knowledge instead of being wasted in industrial labor. Contact with humanity would benefit my people, she admitted, but it would threaten the Empire's fundamental structure.
How so?
The Empire maintains control through fear and the suppression of alternative perspectives. If our people discovered that other ways of organizing society were possible, if they experienced the kind of collaborative, creative environment you've shown my warriors, they might choose differently, Dr. Mendez. Chen finished. Yes, and that would mean the end of the Empire as we know it. Doctor? Chen leaned forward slightly. Is that necessarily a bad thing? If your people could choose freely, if they could pursue their curiosity, develop their talents, form meaningful relationships, contribute to galactic knowledge rather than just galactic conquest, would that be worth the loss of imperial power?
It was the most subversive question imaginable.
Zixthara was being asked to choose between preserving the system that had shaped her entire existence and allowing her people to discover what they might become if they were free. The Empire provides stability, order, purpose, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Does it? Or does it provide the illusion of those things while preventing your people from developing authentic stability, meaningful order, and chosen purpose? Doctor. Chen gestured toward the library around them. This represents thousands of years of human development. We've made terrible mistakes, fought devastating wars, created and destroyed multiple civilizations. But each time, we learned something. We grew. We became more than we were before. And if we allowed our people the same opportunities, they might discover that they're capable of far more than conquest. Your warriors have shown remarkable adaptability, creativity, and intelligence in just a few days of freedom to explore. Imagine what your entire civilization might achieve with centuries of unrestricted development. Through the library windows, Zixthara could see some of her warriors in the distance, working with humans on some kind of project that involved both groups contributing their expertise. The collaboration looked natural, productive, even joyful. But I would be betraying everything I was trained to believe, she said. Would you? Or would you be choosing to honor the deeper purposes that training was supposed to serve? Doctor, Chen asked, what was the original goal of the Osean Empire? What were your ancestors trying to achieve when they began building this system? Zixthara searched her memory of imperial history. The earliest records spoke of survival, of protecting Osean people from hostile neighbors, of ensuring their civilization's continuation in a dangerous galaxy. Over time, those defensive goals had evolved into offensive conquest, but the underlying purpose had been preservation and prosperity for her people. They wanted to ensure our survival and success, she said. And has the Empire achieved that goal? Are your people truly prosperous? Are they fulfilled? Are they growing and developing to their full potential? The honest answer was troubling. The Empire was militarily successful, but its people lived constrained lives within rigid hierarchies. Innovation came from conquest rather than creation. Individual fulfillment was subordinated to institutional efficiency. Most Oseans never had the opportunity to discover what they might become if they were free to explore their potential. We are powerful, Zixthara said. But are you happy? Are you growing? Are you becoming more than you were? The question struck home with devastating accuracy. Zixthara realized that in 3 centuries of existence, she had never actually grown as an individual. She had accumulated experience and authority, but she had never been allowed to develop beyond the parameters set by her initial training. She was the same person at 300 that she had been at 30, just more experienced at performing the same functions. What are you proposing? She asked. Dr. Chen smiled. That depends on what you're willing to consider. We have several possibilities we've been discussing with your warriors. They've been making decisions without my authorization? They've been thinking about their futures, Dr. Chen corrected gently, which is something they've never been allowed to do before. Some of them are interested in remaining here to continue learning. Others want to return to Ocean space to share what they've discovered. Some are considering possibilities they never knew existed. The idea that her warriors were making independent decisions about their futures was both alarming and oddly encouraging. It meant they were developing genuine autonomy, taking responsibility for their own lives rather than simply following orders. What kinds of possibilities? Warrior Gresh wants to establish cultural exchange programs between species. Don is interested in collaborative scientific research. Vec has been working with our physicists on some theoretical problems that neither humans nor Oceans could solve alone, but their combined perspectives might crack. Each possibility represented a fundamental departure from imperial doctrine, but they also represented the kind of innovation and growth that might benefit not just individuals but entire civilizations.
And what about the Empire?
What happens to the millions of Oceans still under imperial control? That depends on choices made by people like you, Dr. Chen said. Change has to start somewhere. It usually begins with individuals who are willing to take risks for something better. Zixthara stood and walked to the window, looking out at the alien world that had somehow become the most important place in her universe. Her shuttle waited in the distance, ready to carry her back to Imperial space and the most crucial decision in galactic history. If I return and report honestly about what I've found here, she said slowly, the Empire will send a larger fleet to destroy this world. Probably, Dr. Chen agreed. If I lie and minimize the threat you represent, they'll send me back with orders to establish Imperial control. Also likely. But if I refuse to return at all, then you'll be choosing to put the welfare of your people above the preservation of the Empire. You'll be choosing growth over stagnation, possibility over certainty, hope over fear. Zixthara turned back to face Dr. Chen. And you think that's the right choice? I think, Dr. Chen said carefully, that only you can decide what's right for you and your people. But I will say this, in all our history, every time humans have chosen freedom and growth over security and control, we've ultimately benefited. Even when the transition was difficult, even when we made mistakes, we emerged stronger and more capable than before. What if we're not like humans? What if our people can't handle that kind of freedom? Your warriors seem to be handling it beautifully, Doctor, Chen observed. They're thinking, creating, collaborating, and growing in ways that your empire never allowed. They're still recognizably Osean, but they're becoming more than they were. Through the window, Zixthara could see Warrior Thon showing a group of human children how to calculate orbital mechanics using traditional Osean mathematical techniques. The children were delighted. Thon was clearly enjoying himself, and the knowledge was flowing freely between species without any coercion or conquest involved. There's something else you should consider, Dr. Chen said softly. The kind of change we're talking about doesn't have to be imposed on your entire civilization at once. It could start small, with individual choices by people like your warriors. Those choices could inspire others who could make their own decisions about what they want their lives to become. Gradual transformation rather than revolutionary upheaval, Zixthara mused. Exactly. Change that grows from within rather than being forced from without. Your people could discover their own paths to freedom and fulfillment. Zixthara realized she was facing the most important decision, not just of her life, but in the history of her species. The choice between preserving a system built on fear and conquest or taking the first step towards something unprecedented, an Osean civilization based on voluntary cooperation and mutual growth. I need to speak with my warriors, she said. Dr. Chen smiled. They're waiting for you in the park. They've been hoping you'd ask for their input on this decision. As they walked back outside, Zixthara felt the bone crown on her head, for what she suspected might be the last time. Soon, she would have to choose what kind of future she wanted to help create. Zixthara gathered her warriors in the same park where she had first met Dr. Chen. The human had discreetly withdrawn to give them privacy for this conversation. As the 6 Oceans formed a circle in the gathering dusk, Zixthara realized this was the first time in their careers that they would make a collective decision rather than simply following orders. You all understand our situation, she began. We must decide how to proceed. The Empire expects a report, and our response will determine not only our own fates, but potentially the fate of this world and our entire civilization. Warrior Gresh spoke first. Commander, with respect, I believe we have already made our choice. We have experienced something here that we never knew was possible. We have discovered aspects of ourselves that Imperial training suppressed. We have seen what collaboration can achieve compared to conquest. And what are you proposing? Zixthara asked, though she suspected she already knew. That we choose not to return to the Empire as it currently exists, Thorne said firmly. That we remain here and work with the humans to develop an alternative approach to galactic civilization. Warrior Vec nodded agreement. The humans have shown us recordings of their history. They had empires like ours that fell when their people chose freedom over security. But the collapse led to something better, not something worse. What about our oaths to the Empire? Zixthara asked. Our duty to our people? Our highest duty is to our people's welfare, Warrior Cross replied. Not to the imperial system that constrains them. We swore to serve Osean civilization, not to perpetuate Osean oppression. Warrior Hrun, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. Commander, I have been thinking about my genetic offspring in the breeding programs. They will be raised as I was, trained to be efficient military units rather than complete individuals. If we have the opportunity to offer them something better, don't we have an obligation to try? The comment hit Zixthara deeply. She had never considered the genetic offspring created from her DNA, but they existed somewhere in the Empire, being shaped by the same system that had constrained her own development. Did she have a responsibility to those future generations? What exactly are you suggesting we do? She asked. The humans have proposed establishing a new kind of settlement, Gresh explained. A place where Oceans and humans can work together on collaborative projects. Scientific research, artistic exploration, cultural exchange, technological development. Not conquest, but creation. And they believe other Oceans would be interested in joining such a settlement? They believe some would be, Thorn replied, especially those whose talents and interests don't fit well within the imperial system. Scientists like Zixvin, whose curiosity is seen as an efficiency. Artists whose creativity is viewed as distraction. Individuals who want to form deeper personal relationships than the Empire allows. Zixthara thought about her brother, about the poetry traditions Gresh had mentioned, about all the suppressed potential within the Empire. How many Oceans were living constrained lives because the system had no place for their authentic selves? The humans have been very clear about the risks, Vec added. They know the Empire will view this as rebellion. They're prepared for the possibility of imperial retaliation, but they believe the potential benefits justify those risks. What kind of benefits? Scientific advances that neither species could achieve alone, Cross said. Cultural developments that enrich both civilizations. Perhaps most importantly, a demonstration that there are alternatives to conquest and oppression. Warrior Zeph, who had been listening carefully, spoke up. Commander, the humans showed us something today that I cannot stop thinking about. They have a museum dedicated to extinct species from their own world. Not species they conquered, but species they failed to protect from environmental destruction. What does that have to do with our situation? They display those extinct species with sorrow, not pride. They remember them as losses to be mourned, not victories to be celebrated. They have learned to see extinction as a tragedy rather than an achievement. Zixthara felt the weight of the bone crown pressing down on her skull. Each skull represented an extinct species, but she had always viewed them as trophies rather than tragedies. The humans were suggesting a completely different way of understanding what the Empire had accomplished. The humans want to help us create a memorial, Gresh said quietly. Not a monument to imperial victory, but a remembrance of what was lost. A commitment to ensuring that future interactions between species lead to mutual enrichment rather than elimination. A memorial for the Kethmari and their astronomical poetry, for the Veltan and their mathematical innovations, for the Hiskata and their gravitational music, for all the civilizations whose unique perspectives were lost to conquest. The idea was emotionally overwhelming. Instead of wearing the skulls as symbols of dominance, creating a space to honor the destroyed civilizations and preserve whatever knowledge remained about their contributions to galactic understanding. What would happen to the Empire if we chose this path? Zixthara asked. We don't know, Thon admitted. Perhaps nothing immediately. Perhaps eventual change as more Oceans discover they have choices. Perhaps collapse. Perhaps transformation. Perhaps continued existence in a different form. Are you prepared for any of those possibilities? Commander, Ron said seriously, are you prepared for the possibility that if we return to the Empire and report according to standard protocol, we will be responsible for destroying the most remarkable civilization any of us has ever encountered?
The question crystallized everything Zixthara had been struggling with.
If they returned and followed imperial orders, humanity would be eliminated. All of their innovations, their collaborative methods, their cultural achievements, their potential contributions to galactic civilization would be lost forever. The humans have made us an offer, Gresh continued. They want to work with us to contact other Oceans who might be interested in a different path, not through conquest or coercion, but through invitation and example. They believe there are others like us. They believe every civilization contains individuals who dream of something better than what currently exists, Vec said. They want to offer those individuals an opportunity to explore those dreams. Zixthara stood and walked to the edge of the park, where she could see the lights of the human city stretching into the distance. Each light represented individuals going about their lives freely, pursuing their own goals, contributing to a society built on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced obedience.
Her warriors followed, forming a loose circle around her, as they had during countless military briefings.
But this felt different. They were not subordinates awaiting orders. They were colleagues participating in a decision that would affect all of their futures. "There is one more thing to consider," she said slowly. "If we choose to remain here, we will be abandoning millions of Ossians who remain under Imperial control. Are we justified in choosing our own freedom while leaving others in oppression? Or," Thon suggested, "are we creating an example that might inspire others to seek their own freedom? Change has to start somewhere. It usually begins with individuals willing to take risks." "Doctor," Chen approached from across the park, moving slowly to give them time to finish their discussion. When she reached the group, she waited respectfully for permission to speak. "Have you reached a decision?" she asked. Zykthara looked around at her warriors, reading the hope and determination in their expressions. For the first time in their careers, they had found something worth choosing rather than something they were ordered to accept. "We have," she said. "But first, I need to do something." She reached up and carefully removed the bone crown from her head. The ancient artifact felt impossibly heavy as she held it in her hands. Each skull representing not just a conquered species, but lost knowledge, eliminated perspectives, extinct possibilities. "This belongs in your memorial," she said, offering the crown to Dr. Chen. Not as a trophy to be displayed, but as a reminder of what the galaxy lost when conquest was chosen over collaboration. Dr. Chen accepted the crown with appropriate solemnity. "We'll create a memorial that honors these civilizations and preserves whatever knowledge remains about their contributions. Their perspectives may be gone, but they won't be forgotten." Zykthara felt a tremendous weight lift from her shoulders. For 3 centuries, she had carried the burden of those extinct civilizations without ever realizing how heavy it had become. "What happens now?" Warrior Cross asked. "Now we begin building something new, Doctor," Chen replied. "A settlement where Ossians and humans can work together as equals. A place where curiosity is encouraged, creativity is celebrated, and individual potential can be fully explored."
And the Empire?
"We'll make its own choices about how to respond," Dr. Chen said. "We'll be ready to defend ourselves if necessary, but our primary focus will be on creation rather than destruction." As they walked back toward the human city, Zykthara realized that for the first time in her life, she was moving towards something she had chosen, rather than something she had been ordered to pursue. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Commander," Gresh said quietly as they walked, "what should we call this new settlement?" Zykthara considered the question. They needed a name that represented their hope for something better than conquest, something that honored both the past they were leaving behind and the future they were choosing to create. "Zixven," she said finally. "For my brother, and for all the others whose curiosity and creativity deserve better than what the Empire offered them." Behind them, the bone crown rested in Dr. Chen's careful hands, no longer a symbol of dominance, but a reminder of the price of choosing fear over understanding. Ahead of them lay the most dangerous and hopeful adventure any of them had ever undertaken, the chance to discover what their people might become if they were free to grow beyond the limitations imposed by conquest. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is not the ability to destroy, but the courage to ask why destruction was ever thought necessary in the first place. In the months that followed, word of the settlement spread through unofficial channels in the Empire. Ossians began arriving quietly, individuals whose talents and interests had never found proper expression under Imperial rule. Scientists like Zykthara who asked too many questions. Artists whose creativity threatened standardization. Individuals who wanted to form relationships deeper than professional efficiency allowed. The Empire's response was predictably harsh. Official proclamations declared the settlement a dangerous rebellion. Military expeditions were authorized to retrieve confused personnel and eliminate human corruption of Ossian values. But something unexpected happened. The larger the Imperial response grew, the more Ossians began questioning why their government was so afraid of voluntary collaboration. The more harshly the Empire condemned the settlement's peaceful approach to interspecies relations, the more attractive that approach seemed to individuals who had never considered alternatives to conquest. The settlement called Zixven became more than just a place where oceans and humans worked together. It became proof that another way was possible, that strength could be measured by creation rather than destruction, that security could come from cooperation rather than domination. And in the memorial they built for extinct civilizations, the bone crown sat in a place of honor. surrounded by recovered artifacts and reconstructed knowledge from species that had once been conquered. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see not just what had been lost, but what might be saved if civilizations chose understanding over elimination. The crown had become what it should have been from the beginning, not a symbol of power over others, but a reminder of the responsibility to preserve and protect the magnificent diversity of intelligence that made the galaxy worth inhabiting. Commander Zixthara, now simply Zixthara, teacher and researcher in the settlement's educational programs, would sometimes stand before the memorial and remember the day a small human had asked her why she wore a crown of bones. That simple question had changed everything, proving that sometimes the most devastating weapon in the universe is genuine curiosity about why things are the way they are and whether they might be different. The humans had been right about one thing. Some questions are more dangerous than any weapon ever forged. They have the power to topple empires, transform civilizations, and set entire species free to discover their full potential. The galaxy would never be the same.